to how to fix it. It's time for another Patreon-sponsored review, and this is, yet again, not the Knights of the Old Republic 2 video. Long story short, I'm still figuring out how to organize my thoughts for that one, so I'm putting it on the back burner for the moment, and since the patron has been waiting a really long time for me to finally get around to do that, I offered them a chance to pick a replacement review that I'd push to the top of the list as collateral. Their choice was the first episode of a British series called Ackley Bridge, and normally I'd give you some backstory about the show, but seeing as how we're only looking at the premiere, which is meant to set up everything, we can probably just jump right in, but I'll give you the premise. It's about a newly integrated school in a community in Yorkshire, England, where for the first time the Pakistani students and English students will be mixed together in classes, so there's a bit of tension there with some pushback on both sides. Any other background runs into spoiling the plot, so let's just get right to it. Oh, and this was completely unplanned, it was just happenstance, but it is rather apt that it's relatively early September when I'm reviewing a school-set drama, because this is around the time that students go back to school in the United States, or at the very least New York. Alright, pencils out, class. The basic premise is that the show takes place at a newly opened school in a mixed neighborhood, replacing two segregated schools that taught lower class and, from what I've seen, primarily white British students and Pakistani students respectively. Now, I know that the Pakistani students are also British because they live in Britain, but in order to distinguish them, I'm going to classify the students by which school they formerly attended to keep them straight, since there's some tension between the two bodies, and I want to be able to make that clear. The idea of the new school is to bring the community together through unity or something, and it's overseen by both the head teacher and the school's sponsor, along with the school board. Through all this, we've got a few sets of principal characters who have their own contained plots that run into the others, so we'll just start at the top. We open up with Missy Booth and Nazreen Paracha, best friends from the neighborhood, discussing the school's opening while drinking alcohol on a couch in the middle of town. On their way to school the following day, it's established that Missy and her sister Haley live with their grandmother, and that Missy was held back a year due to something occurring the previous year, implied to be related to her and Haley's mother. At the school, the head teacher, Mandy Carter, is prepping a speech she plans to give, looking for support from her husband, Steve Bell, who was also the PE teacher. Wait a minute. Mandy seems familiar. Let's see. Move her to a space station, give her two tiny pigtails, and it's Linda with a Y from Doctor Who. I swear, that's the thing I love about British TV. You can pick nearly any show, and at least one cast member will have appeared in Doctor Who. This show actually has two Doctor Who connections, since Steve is played by Paul Nichols, who appeared on Law & Order UK at the same time as Freema Agyeman and Peter Davison. Steve expresses concern about the amount of time that Mandy has been spending with the school's sponsor, Sadiq, but Mandy brushes off the comments. Upon arriving at the school, Missy runs into a teacher who formerly taught at the old school, Emma Keane, who showed up too late to a staff meeting due to her flight being delayed, and interrupting it when she notices an old friend, Samir, who has become the school's community liaison. As classes begin, Steve, who evidently teaches more than PE, goes through roll until arriving at Jordan Wilson, the class asshole, who introduces himself by saying,
Abdullah bin Kevin.
Yo! Are you stupid?
Which doesn't sit well with the Pakistani students or the British students alike. He's reprimanded, and the kids are all funneled into an assembly, and the kids are typically disruptive. What's really interesting about it is that Jordan skips out early and hangs up a banner, claiming that all Indian girls and all ugly white girls at the school have to wear hijabs, which enrages the Pakistani students and gets him sent to the head office. Sadiq wants to expel Jordan immediately, but Steve advocates against it, citing that he doesn't want to give up on Jordan and believing that expelling a kid on the first day would be a bad sign for the new school. though it's also very likely that he just wants the reason to stand against Sadiq to assert his dominance with Mandy. Mandy agrees with Steve, believing that Jordan's behavior was because he wants the school to fail and he wants to be expelled, so she decides not to cave, sending him home for the day. Steve oversees it and intends to speak with Jordan's father, who is obviously abusive, and doesn't care to hear Steve out to deal with Jordan's behavior in a constructive way.
I have to ask twice now. Come on, Jordan.
In Steve's PE class, the students clearly segregate themselves, with the two rival team captains from the old schools deliberately only picking their own friends from their respective schools for a game. Meanwhile, Emma's daughter Chloe arrives at the school via expensive cross-country Uber from London, which, for us Americans, is like being driven from, Washington, D.C. to New York City, so pretty damn far. She arrives as Emma is telling her class that she plans to be a fun teacher, actively encouraging the students with a collaborative class contract, agreeing to clauses which decree no homework on Fridays, and chucking books written by dead white men into the bin if nothing in it speaks directly to their experiences, which doesn't sit well with Mandy, but of course Chloe arriving and immediately vomiting into that bin takes precedence. I guess they're not going to want those books back then. At lunch, some issues arise between Missy and Nazreen, as Missy's boisterous behavior, which Nazreen likely contributed to, or at the very least embraced while hanging out with her outside of school, becomes the subject of derision and ridicule from Nazreen's school friends, and starts to drive a wedge between the two best friends. Emma talks with Chloe, who reveals that Chloe's father has a new wife and she's gotten pregnant, and they kicked Chloe out to make room for the new baby, but Emma tells her that they'll sort it all out. Emma and Mandy have it out regarding Emma's conduct, which Emma defends as trying to get the attention of the students, but Mandy won't have it.
Hit them with facts. 1 in 3 kids from this town fails GCSE English, although you'd know that if you've been to the inset day.
A few of the other teachers invite Emma out for dinner, but Emma initially declines, having to take care of Chloe, but after a phone call from Chloe's father, which explains that the situation wasn't quite as black and white as Chloe made it out to be, she was kicked out after pushing the stepmom after they happily announced the news of the new baby, and causing her to trip, Emma decides to go out. Emma grounds Chloe and takes her phone, but forgets to secure her own cell phone while she takes a shower before going out to the pub. Chloe goes through her vacation photos and finds a topless one, posting it on Twitter with the hashtag Ackley College, which naturally goes viral with the students and faculty, and while Emma remains none the wiser, because as was established earlier, she doesn't check her phone very often. At Missy's home, she prepares dinner for her grandmother, brushing off her sister's announcement of Emma's topless photo, saying that she probably got hacked, which is sorta true, but soon finds a new crisis. Their mother has passed out in their room, and based on the dialogue, this is not the first time, nor is it a good thing, since they're forced to enlist the help of the Parachas to sneak their mother out and into the Parachas' house before their grandmother sees. At the teacher's dinner, a few of the teachers, including Steve's assistant PE teacher, bring up some theories regarding how Sadiq is allegedly known to be quite the Don Juan in the area, which naturally bothers Steve. As Mrs. Booth recovers at the Parachas, Missy again brings up Nasreen's friends, to which Nasreen asks Missy why she doesn't tone down her behavior a bit in front of them. And hearing your best friend tell you to completely alter your personality to suit their other friends is not something that's fun to hear, so the wedge is driven even deeper. The next morning, Chloe begs not to be taken to Ackley Briggs, while the students remark on Emma's photo without her realizing what they're mocking. Missy tries to warn Emma before class starts, but Mandy bursts in to have a private meeting regarding the photo. Emma is beyond pissed at Chloe and blows up at her in the teacher's lounge, ordering her to go home. Jordan is brought before both Samir and a police officer in regards to his prejudiced activities, refusing to seriously cooperate with the officer when asked why he hung the banner. Nazreen tries to defend Missy to her friends, but they stand by their opinions and continue to bash Missy. While walking, they're confronted by Mrs. Booth, who tries to interact with Nazreen, but is pushed away while Naz ignores her. Missy runs to her mother, causing more derision from Naz's friends, and the wedge is ever deeper. While a student makes his opinion known to Steve about not wanting Jordan in class because of his racist behavior, Jordan immediately proves the point by walking in wearing a headscarf. The angry student chases him out of the classroom with Steve following and ordering Jordan to take it off, and you can probably guess where this is going. A school with generic uniforms, a good chunk of the student population wear headscarves. Steve screws up and rips the scarf off the wrong student. Though I think, given that he was aiming for Jordan Wilson, most people would forgive the honest mistake once it was explained. Mandy and Steve get into an argument regarding Sadiq, but they're not able to settle their differences because Jordan takes over the PA system and talks about how it doesn't matter who they are, they're all going nowhere because they live in Ackley Bridge. Missy and Naz get into a public altercation after school, then Emma breaks up, and Mandy tries to deal with Jordan, but Steve is still going on about her alleged affair with Sadiq, and she storms away. Steve talks with Jordan and assigns him an essay on why respecting other cultures is important, while Emma prepares to send Chloe back to her father's. However, Chloe's father has a different idea. He has brought all of Chloe's things up since...
Why not your turn?
Turn.
Jordan draws some pictures on a sheet of paper, which Steve remarks on. Clearly he likes art, but with his father, it's probably not embraced at home. Though Jordan is incredulous and actually lampshades the usual cliché.
Do you reckon I could get into art school with that, sir? Do you reckon there's a whole world waiting for me, sir?
Steve takes another sheet, one that Jordan was hiding, seeing a cartoon of Mandy and Sadiq kissing, and after Steve tries to grab Jordan, Jordan starts pushing Steve, talking about Mandy and Sadiq, until Steve has had enough and punches Jordan in the face, which, while immensely satisfying, Steve immediately regrets. Back on the couch, Missy invites a male student to talk about a proposition to get back at Naz. The episode ends as she asks the student,
You know Nazreen?
I'll kill you if I... Yeah, I know.
Sleep with her for me.
First off, the premise is really solid and an interesting idea for a show. It's got a lot of possibilities, and it presents a very interesting window into the UK, although I'm not sure how accurate it is to places similar to the fictional Ackley Bridge. The characters all seem realistic and balanced. None of them are samey, and they all have their quirks and idiosyncrasies that endear, or in Jordan Wilson's case, enrage. Speaking of Jordan, the racial tension is handled through my very specifically white American lens very well. The conflict is there, but there seems to be deeper reasons for tension that I'd guess was probably expanded on later in the season. I haven't checked past the first episode since I wanted this to stand on its own, but like that gym class scene with the two rival captains seemed to be building to something between those two specific captains, especially with how the Pakistani captain turned to the British captain during Jordan's loudspeaker hijack and the British captain stormed out of the room. I also like all the actors. They're all putting in great performances, even on the first episode, and the characters feel complete in a way that many shows can't manage. Sometimes in the first episode, the characters are unbalanced because the actors haven't figured them out yet. But I didn't get that sense from this, which is damn impressive. But despite being a drama, the show isn't dragging us into Riverdale teen drama territory where everything is dour. There are some really funny bits mixed in with the serious stuff, like the dragging of Mrs. Booth out, set to a loud and obnoxious rendition of Amy Winehouse's Valerie. Again, for that to be in the first episode is damn impressive because most shows don't come out of the gate running like that. I enjoyed the beginning of all the stories presented, but I think my favorite was Missy's. I like how Missy's character arc is about not wanting to compromise herself to please Naz's other friends. It's clear from how she dresses and how she presents herself that we're supposed to see her as trashy and boisterous, especially with the issues with her mother, riffraff daughter of a druggie who flirts with every boy she sees. And yet, we're shown that despite Missy taking the wrong approach in her fight with Naz, and I don't condone her final act of the episode at all, she's ultimately in the right regarding Naz and her friends. She shouldn't have to change her personality to satisfy Naz's friends. They dislike her because they see her as, in American terms, trailer trash. And the fact that Naz isn't jumping to her defense is a great well for conflict, because especially in this new school with so many new people and new situations, Naz needs the comforts of home, or rather, the familiar people that she knew at her old school. But Missy throws a wrench in it because she's making those two worlds collide. her school world with her reserved friends, and her home world with Missy and her outrageous personality, and it is done remarkably well, as are the other plot lines for the most part. I like the direction that Emma's is going in, and it'd be interesting to see where her relationship with her daughter goes from here as they adjust to their new status quo. Plus the fallout of the topless photo, and add in the Jordan Wilson stuff, which, while it is a little cliche, given that it's obvious that his art skills will factor into his redemption once he works through the abusive father stuff, is a really good character because it's the kind of jackass that I think everyone can remember going to school with, the one who's disruptive for seemingly no good reason. The show is remarkably good, but there are a few issues that I found with it. For the first episode, it really shoves a lot into that hour. The episode establishes every single plot line for every single major character, and because it's an ensemble cast, there are a lot of plot lines. There's the stuff between Missy and Naz, the stuff between Mandy and Steve, the stuff with Emma and Chloe, the Jordan Wilson stuff, both his racist behavior and the abuse at his father's hand, Emma's potential romance with Samir. If it sounds like I'm droning, it's because I am. And I didn't even list every single plot line in that run-on sentence. I didn't even get to the stuff with Missy's mother and Emma's issues with Mandy. I know British shows usually have short episode orders, but save some plot for the rest of the show, guys. In keeping with the episode being a little overloaded, I don't think that the relationship issues between Mandy and Steve were given enough room to breathe. He jumps to the cheating immediately, basically from the start, and spurred on by comments. Meanwhile, we barely know these characters. We've never seen Mandy and Sadiq pop off anywhere privately within the episode itself. They just interact publicly a bunch. So it feels like Steve is being entirely irrational, which might have been the point, but if they're married, I find it hard to believe that he'd trust her so little that a few rumors could make him that jealous. Especially since she's on his side for most of the interactions with Sadiq. These types of plots are a lot more gratifying if the audience is taking on a bit of a ride. Like, we think, well, maybe he's got some ground, and then it's like, nope, just jealousy. But really, other than just a sense of too much information all at once, I really couldn't find any other flaws. While I think the episode is really good, I'd probably split the plots up. Give a few episodes of Mandy and Sadiq having private meetings that turn out to be private meetings, wink wink nug nugs. But I'd love to see, like, in the first episode, she skips the dinner to go out with Sadiq, and at the dinner, the other teachers joke about Sadiq betting all the women in town, and Steve is like, well, Mandy's different. But he starts to notice her not being in her office when she should be, or having phone calls that seem to be with Sadiq that have a bit of a non-professional nature to them. Naturally, they'd all be unrelated, but Steve and the audience wouldn't know that at first. And then during the second Jordan Wilson issue, which I might place in, like, a second episode, after Steve pulls the headscarf off that girl, we get that Sadiq asks what would happen, and he's like, why are you talking with Sadiq about me? That way we remain invested, because as it stands, I don't think she's doing anything with him, and it sort of makes me dislike Steve, even though we're clearly supposed to support his crusade with Jordan. Same with giving room to breathe with Missy and Naz's problems, making that schoolyard fight the culmination of several days of tension instead of just 2. Really, I think that it needed to be a 2-parter and not shoved into 1 hour. I think if they had 2 hours to expand on all of it, it might have been able to give everything room to breathe, and it would have been much more gratifying. Overall, the episode was stellar. And that was how I'd fix episode 1 of Ackley Bridge. Ultimately, a really good first episode of a show that I wasn't sure about at first, but one that I really enjoyed watching. And while my plate is full right now, I might actually be adding this to my list at some future point. There wasn't a whole lot for me to do with the review. The episode is actually really solid, apart from being a bit top-heavy, but I hope that the patron enjoyed the review as much as I enjoyed the episode. Next time, we find out the results of the Sliders poll, and based on early checking of the results as of filming, I'm gonna have my work cut out for me. See you next time. You know, it's ironic, because I remember getting comments a few years ago that my original review outfit reminded people of a British school uniform.